Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk. Our session today is titled Supporting Families' Early Learning Decision Making. I'm Debbie Mathias from the BUILD Initiative and the Director of the QRIS National Learning Network. Before we begin our session, I'd like to thank the Alliance for Early Success and other generous funders for making this learning community possible. We began this series for state quality administrators and leaders to support their essential work within states around early learning system building. Quality administrators are welcome to invite other participants as related to the specific topic of the call. And we know several of you invited colleagues interested in QRIS implementation and family engagement, as well as colleagues from Head Start, pre-K, and early intervention. We have colleagues on this call from over 23 states and territories. We intentionally keep the sessions small to invite conversation and sharing. We hope these calls enable us to illuminate challenges, innovation, and promising practices. Make sure to keep track of your ideas, questions, and example for our talks throughout the session. Enter them in the chat box so we can discuss. As folks filled in the registered for the session today, it became clear that many states incorporate family engagement strategies within the QRIS, such as strengthening families or asking programs to address family engagement in the continuous quality improvement plans. The presenters today from Louisiana and North Carolina will share strategies to assist families in understanding quality, availability, and options of the early learning programs in their communities. They'll also tell you about innovative approaches to coordination, enrollment, and dissemination of program quality information. Thank you for taking the time to answer those questions when you registered. Many of you provided thoughtful ideas. We reviewed the information and it's informing the presentation. A few of the comments I found most interesting included, someone mentioned how states were using the search features on the websites, and many of you mentioned that higher quality facilities were prioritized in the listing given to families. There were some concerns expressed about how choices were playing out in rural areas of the state. More than one person mentioned the use of social media for sharing information and that they're creating new strategies in that format. Reaching families to share information about what quality looks like was mentioned by many. How to engage families and find out what quality means to them, or how to have information that's relevant to family priorities and what they're looking for was a common question raised in the comments. Finally, how to integrate cultural sensitivity, language preferences, and other key family choices into the process was identified. Well, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters today. Danielle Johnson is the Director of Early Childhood Systems with the Durham Partnership for Children. She'll be talking about the Durham community, and we'll have her go first. But just briefly, I'd also like to say that Masha Patel is the Accountability Senior Manager in the Office of Early Childhood at Louisiana Department of Education. Dominic Robinson is the Enrollment and Access Senior Manager for the Office of Early Childhood with the Louisiana Department of Education. Kay Eichler is a consultant with the Louisiana Department of Education. And finally, Lindsay is the Portfolio Senior Manager for Early Childhood with the Louisiana Department of Education. And we're really looking forward to hearing what our speakers have to say today. And Danielle, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you and good afternoon. I bring you greetings from Durham, North Carolina, where we hold two nicknames. We are known as the Bull City as well as the City of Medicine. So I have a background from New York where I've worked with the 0 to 5 system with the Head Start, Early Head Start grantee program that also was a universal pre-K program. So my experience and knowledge is really steeped in the 0 to 5 continuum around Early Head Start, and universal pre-K approaches. So today I'll be sharing with you briefly just an overview of what we have found to be a very successful approach in enrolling families and also notifying and informing families on high-quality pre-K options in Durham, North Carolina. I'm sorry. I've had some technical difficulties, but I think we're managing through. So, okay. So our universal pre-K program is very steeped and woven into the existing 0 to 5 early childhood systems in Durham County, meaning that we touch Early Head Start, we interface with our subsidized programs, both for-profit and not-for-profit, as well as our public school programs who also provide pre-K services. So a little background history, starting around 2005, our county really started to examine what would a collaborative process look like to provide pre-K access and information to families. Because what we had discovered was that many families were having to go to different locations to inquire about services, to enroll for different programs, and it can be very burdensome. It can be a hardship on families having to travel to the various locations throughout the county to register or to inquire information on pre-K services. So I would say around 2008, we really did an overhaul with our UPK process, meaning that we looked at our application and our partnering programs such as Durham Head Start, as well as the Durham Public School System, and we looked to see what were the commonalities, what were the common threads that we could build upon to create a one portal entry for families in Durham County. So in 2008, we created a one application, and this application was designed to be bilingual and to pretty much encompass and incorporate all the criteria requirements for the various program options that are available in Durham County. So again, referring to Durham Head Start, Durham Public Schools, and then with the NC Pre-K program in Durham County. So what we did was, the partnership, we created this one application, made it bilingual, incorporated all the criteria elements, and this way families only had to do one entry. So meaning that our building where we're located, we currently have Early Head Start in our building, Child Care Services Association, which also provides scholarship information, as well as Durham Social Services. So what a convenient way to have a one entry, meaning that there will be no wrong entry. So if families came downstairs to Durham Social Services to inquire about services, they would also be informed about the universal application process, because Durham Social Services intake workers will be able to assist families in completing the application. Once all applications are completed, the partnership then kind of collates that information and then disseminates it out to our partnering programs. Just to backtrack a little, the partnership also provides trainings around the application to those collaborating agencies. So let's say we have the public library who may want to send some of their librarians or some of their support staff to be part of the process. They will be trained by our staff on how to complete the application and support families in completing the application and obtaining information on high-quality child care programs. So what we looked at, again, was to bring resources together in the different agencies, because what we found that the information was kind of siloed, meaning that parents would find information from one program but would not learn about all the other options. So again, we thought by having this one application, this one portal of no wrong door entry, would provide families with all the information and options available in Durham County to obtain services for pre-K. Currently, our community partners include Durham Department of Social Services, Child Care Services Association, Head Start, Durham Public Schools, Book Harvest, as well as the East Durham Children's Initiative and our county library. So the program options that are currently available for families in Durham County would be placed within the Durham Public Schools pre-K program. Durham Public Schools just recently opened a preschool program titled the Whitted School, which is more geared towards a zone within Durham County, but that's their first priority. And then once additional seats, families can also apply for those additional seats at the Whitted School. We also have Durham Head Start program, and then we have the partnership, Durham's partnership NC Pre-K program, because currently the partnership holds the contract administrator, is the contract administrator for the NC Pre-K program in Durham County. And this is where we blend private as well as for-profit, non-for-profit, and what we call GS 110, Christian-based schools, to participate in the NC Pre-K program and provide services for children. So when looking at eligibility and placement, each application will be reviewed and scored by the 3 program and the program agencies. Eligibility requirements vary by the program, and we also found that the information is shared with families during time of application. So when families come in to apply for the program, they're informed your application will be shared with the following programs. And there's a cover sheet that families are provided with that explains the different program options. Along with that, parents have the option of identifying the best address they would like to use for placement for their children. So what we find is that many will either use their work address, their home address, or even their pickup person. A lot of families use additional support for pickup, so they would identify their pickup person and use that address for placement. So as applications are completed, the children also receive a developmental screen, which is conducted by our partnering agency, which is Durham Public Schools. All children who apply for the program will be screened within the application period. The shared process to select and assign children is used amongst the collaborating programs, and what happens is the systems pretty much talk to each other, and then as a checks and balance, we kind of also come together with the hard copy, old-fashioned spreadsheet to identify children, because what we want to do is also support continuity of care. For example, if a parent has a child who attends a private child care program that is within the system of our NC Pre-K program, and the parent indicates, I would like for my child to remain for their pre-K services, we would not disrupt that child's service. The child would remain at that private site. So what we also do is that we try to notify families no later than mid-July, for example, for the 2018-19 school year, about their placement for the upcoming school year. Our program recruitment and parent awareness, we use a variety of approaches to keep families informed. We also solicit feedback from families when going out to things such as the PTA meetings, family engagement night at our private local providers. We also attend informational sessions that may be held throughout the county by other partnering agencies such as Department for Social Services, the Department of Health, the library. We go out wherever the people are is pretty much where we go. So we canvass the community. We've even had informational sessions in nail salons because again, you want to go where the people are. So we try to go out and canvass and really saturate the community and get feedback and input on how to best inform parents about high quality and the options available to them throughout Durham County. So again, as I mentioned, we attend countywide functions. So if there's a health fair, informational expo that the library may be hosting, we're sure to have staff and people there to participate in that. We have a huge kindergarten registration throughout the county that kicks off. We attend those events. We have what we call a transition to kindergarten because you never know. You may have families that have siblings who would need and benefit from pre-K. So we try to be, again, a presence there at those different functions. And oftentimes, many of those transition to K events are spearheaded by the partnership. We're also targeting parent meetings. We target all, be it a home provider, center-based provider, to really go out, to be where the families are, to get their feedback and input, to find out what works, what is the best approach that you would think would be beneficial to families in offering services and information. And ultimately, again, we utilize community stakeholder relationships. We really look to those relationships that we've built throughout the community to, again, share information, disseminate information, and bring the quality of early childhood to the forefront wherever we are within the community, of informing our stakeholders, families, and just to ensure that information is available and accessible to families. And this is the last of my slides. This is just a resource of information of our partnering sites, what they provide, and how they also support families in obtaining and identifying high-quality services. Because you may find some families that may say, well, you know, central-based service may not be the best option for us. And that's where they can then find additional information that would support their needed services.
Thank you, Danielle. That was just such a great kickoff to this webinar. There are a couple of questions. When you were focusing on pre-K, I know that's a big thing in North Carolina with such a strong pre-K program, but are parents at this site in this community enrollment also able to find information about birth to 3 services for the younger children?
Yes, they are. So when our staff are interfacing with families, they're doing like an intake assessment, and that's when they're asking families, are there any additional resources that you would find beneficial for you and your family? And if a family does say, well, you know what, we're interested in services for 0 to 3, we have information on our Early Head Start program that we share with families, as well as Child Care Services Association, where they're able to apply for what we call a scholarship, as well as information is shared with them on DSS services, because they can then also apply for a subsidized voucher.
Okay, that's great. I had a question about quality per se. Do you talk about, like, I know that California has a rated license, but you also give the program stars, right? So
Yes, we do.
Talk with families about what that rating means and what parents should expect? Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. So we explain to the families that our programs that participate must be 4 or 5-star, which is considered the highest star rating here for us. Mm-hmm. And we explain to them what that entails, how it looks at teacher credentials, it looks at classroom size and ratio, different factors that go into the star rating process. So we do explain that to families, and we also explain to them, as you mentioned, what to look for when you're going into high quality. What are some of the elements of high quality child care? So yes, that information is shared with families. They're provided with brochures. And another avenue that we use, again, is with our Child Care Services Association, where families are even able to make appointments to drive around to different locations to look at best early childhood settings. So families are able to travel with a resource counselor to observe and to just see what's the best fit for them and their family.
Wow, that's an interesting feature to really help families identify what high quality is and to figure out what they're looking for their children.
Right.
It seems like this community hub that you've created is also turning out to be kind of a magnet for other child-serving programs, right, that can share information through your hub. And like you mentioned, the library and other activities that are going on. So that really makes a resource-rich hub for the parents to use.
And that was pretty much the goal because, like I mentioned previously, families were having to go around to different locations, and that's not only time-consuming, but it's a strain on finances. Be it if you're using your own personal vehicle or having to access public transportation, it can take a lot. So we try to be as intentional, concise as possible to really provide, again, that one-stop shop of information for families.
Well, you've been here at this a couple of years figuring this out. Share something interesting that you've learned about helping families in the search for care or early learning experiences for their children. What have you found interesting that you've learned is from when you started a few years ago to now? How have things changed?
Okay, so I came aboard in 2008, and what I found is that what you may think works for one group for a full year may not be the same the following year and the year after. So having to be pliable and creating these systems is definitely something is a takeaway for me. Not becoming fixated on here's the best approach. Here's, yes, we use research-based, but we also have to understand that what we may deem as a best fit for a family may not be the best fit for them. To really listen to that family and to understand and respect their values and their needs and what it is that they're looking for their family, and to come alongside them and really support them in obtaining high quality for their children.
Well, gosh, that's just such an excellent point to wrap this part of the conversation up on. Thank you so much, Danielle. And,
thank you for inviting us to share.
Oh, my pleasure. And now let's turn it over to Louisiana, who we're talking here more about a state-level system and how they've put this together. Nasha?
Yes. Thank you so much for inviting us to talk today. We're excited to talk to you about how the Louisiana model really works to inform families about the opportunities that are available to them and then support them in the decision-making process. So as Debbie said, my name is Masha Patel, and I'm joined today by 3 of my colleagues here at the Louisiana Department of Education's Office of Early Childhood. We represent a larger team, but there's the 4 of us today, Kay Eichler, Lindsay Bradford, and Dominic Robinson. So I'm going to start us off, but you're going to hear from all 3 of us over the course of our presentation, and we'll be available to answer questions about any part of our presentation.
That's a great point, Nasha. Type questions as they go through this into the chat box so we can hold that thought. We will wait for a break between the sections, but that way we can make sure to go back and work on the questions that you have as we move forward.
Sure, absolutely. So in 2012, Louisiana looked at a fragmented early childhood landscape and realized that we could be serving children and families better. At that time, early childhood programs were run by different state agencies with no clear standards or information about the differences between the programs available to families. Louisiana saw these challenges caused by a fragmented early childhood system in 3 buckets. Number 1, that children did not have equal access to high-quality programs. These programs varied across the state and by program type. Number 2, that families did not have clear, comparable information about the quality of programs, which made it difficult for families to make informed choices for their children. And 3, providers were held to different standards. There were different regulations and accountability, which led to a range of quality, even though it was the same public dollars being used to offer these programs. Since 2012, when we passed a state law to unify the early childhood system, now in 2018, 6 years later, Louisiana has taken several steps to provide families and children better experiences to access and enroll in programs. We now require that early childhood programs that take public funding meet universal higher standards regardless of program type, with a focus on outcomes rather than input. We also seek to infuse informed choice into the system at all levels, families, providers, and communities. And to achieve this, we've established local networks in every community and centralized state oversight under the State Board of Early Childhood Education. We continue to refine our approach, but we're excited to talk to you today about the progress we've made to this point. With that, I'm going to hand it over to talk about the work Louisiana has undertaken to implement Act 3, the law that was passed in 2012, to unify our system. I'm going to hand it over to Kay.
Masha. And we want to start here with our vision because it's an integral part of everything that we do. So this vision emerged as we engaged with stakeholders across the state after the initial legislation was passed. We listened to their concerns. And when I say we engaged with stakeholders, it wasn't simply meeting with Head Start and then meeting with child care. We would have everyone in the room at the same time, and often these were large forums, and I really think that started the foundation for the relationships that were built, so everyone heard everything at the same time. What we heard from them was that we needed to level the playing field and put everyone on the same page. So the 4 components that you see on this page reflect what was voiced in the legislation and by stakeholders. We used this vision to rally support and build community as we began the initiative, and we continue to use it to anchor presentations and meetings that we continue to have. So our vision has translated to a framework of 5 essential elements that support our initiative. An early childhood network in every community. So when I say an early childhood network, I need to let you know that that is all publicly funded programs. It's child care centers that accept child care assistance. It's Head Start centers. It's public school pre-K classes. It's non-public school pre-K classes that accept public funds. So this, along with the unified rating system, coordinated enrollment, which Dominic will go into detail with, and teacher preparation, all under the governance of the state board, is our current framework. So the initial legislation that was passed in 2012 has been refined, and policies have been added that are rooted in what was learned from local implementation pilots over a 3-year period. Using cycles of piloting, reflecting, and refining over 3 years, we now have law and policy that was driven by the stakeholders. They understand it because their implementation work informed it. So what you see on this slide is kind of at a glance an implementation timeline. So you'll see the term parish on the slides in some places, and I just want to point out, if you don't know, that that's Louisiana's term that's synonymous with county. So it's a geographic area, much as a county. So we have 64 parishes, 70 districts, and numerous charters. In the spring of 2013, we advertised requests for applications for our first cohort of pilots. Cohort 1 launched in the 13-14 school year. Cohort 2 was launched in 14-15, and all the remaining communities were brought on board as Cohort 3 for the 15-16 school year. And that was mandated in legislation as the first full year of implementation. So now let's kind of zoom in on community networks as change agents. And so when this legislation was passed and the dust settled and we looked at it, it called for a statewide network. But we knew that that could not be driven from Baton Rouge. We knew that it would not be productive for us to give them a list of things to do and say, here's what we've determined you need to do for improvement. We knew that the uniqueness that we have in Louisiana, just as all states have, needed to inform the implementation both locally and statewide. So we sought to bring on communities that could let us know how that worked for them. And so we started out, like I said, with volunteers for Cohort 1. And you'll see those folks are the darker parishes, the blue parishes that are on the screen. And so they were spread geographically. They contained both metropolitan, rural, large, and small communities. Each one of those networks has a lead agency. In the beginning, we called the lead agencies coordinating partners. We really didn't want to have any one entity in charge or being the boss, so we asked folks to coordinate the activity, and they were fine with that. So that was an easy step. They weren't necessarily telling folks who they didn't have a relationship with what they had to do or could do or couldn't do. So that worked well for us. When we got to the final year of implementation with the cohort 3, and that was the first full year of implementation, which we also called our practice year, they became lead agencies because we knew at that point in time the relationships had been built and we were ready for really to appoint true leaders. And so at the bottom of the screen there, you see the activities of each community network. They account for every birth to 5 at-risk child. They provide 2 class observations in each classroom of publicly funded programs, one in the fall, one in the spring, and they coordinate enrollment to improve access for families. And so here I'm zooming in a little bit more so that I can tell you, just give you some more details about how this community network concept unfolded. And so we started with cohort 1. I pointed out that those are the blue communities. The green color are cohort 2. And if you notice, they pretty much, for the most part, touch a cohort 1 community geographically. And then gold, cohort 3, the rest of the state. So each year as this work unfolded, we made sure we held forums and opportunities for the communities to connect with each other, to share their experiences, and also to connect with folks who might want to come on for the next cohort. So the total process was an opt-in process. We needed folks who at the outset said yes to doing this. We kind of held our breath up until cohort 3, not sure if we would get everyone to come on board voluntarily, and we were very pleasantly surprised that they did. I have called out some specific communities just to show you the differences that we dealt with as we rolled this out. And you can see we have very small community of East Carroll, only 3 sites, high poverty, and limited local resources. And then we moved down to Orleans Parish, 160 sites, high poverty, urban area, independent and competitive providers. Very, very different from also just right up the river, Ascension Parish with 30 sites, growing, divided by the river into very high poverty on one side of the Mississippi and a very affluent area on the other side of the Mississippi. We also have Natchitoches Parish that I've called out, 22 sites, a small college town with a very supportive city government surrounded by small communities. So this initiative really has been a series of stories that have emerged from local communities that we tell and retell to other communities to inspire them, to give them ideas. And it's a concept that has worked really well. And all the while, the focus is on how they make things better for children and improve access for families. So I'm hoping this background kind of gives you some insight into how we roll this out. Of course, now we're in our second full year of implementation. We are still learning, and it's been an interesting process. So now that we've provided you with an overview of community networks, we're going to zoom in and give you more detail about the programs that comprise them and how access is being made easier for families. So I'm going to ask my colleague Lindsay to talk to you next.
Thanks, Kay. As Masha mentioned earlier, one of the challenges that families faced was a fragmented system of early childhood programs. Louisiana offers a number of quality options for low-income families, including publicly funded pre-K programs in both public and non-public schools, programs and services for children with special needs, the Child Care Assistance Program, which provides financial assistance for child care to families while they are working or attending school, and Head Start and Early Head Start programs, just to name a few. The lack of a coordinated system for enrolling in one of these programs meant that families were faced with several different challenges. They did not have a centralized way of gaining information about what programs were available in their community. Families would have to visit multiple sites to complete their application and find out if they were eligible for the programs offered at that site. There was also a lack of consistency in the waitlist process, where parents may be on a wait list for one site while another provider in their community had available seats. There was not a big picture of the need in each community and how best to meet parents' needs for their families. Also, providers were responsible for locating families in need of care and recruiting those families to attend their school or center. In implementing the community network system, we realized that what works in one area may not fit the needs of another. Coordinated enrollment requires the local lead agency to work directly with their program partners, the child care centers, non-public schools, Head Start centers, and others, to collaborate in order to reach as many families as they can to provide an educational opportunity to as many at-risk children as possible. This allowed the community network program partners to have a voice in defining a local process for enrollment that meets the needs of their individual communities. Coordinated enrollment conducted at the local level allows networks to ensure that families are informed about all seats that they may have available to them. Families can easily find out what programs they are eligible for without having to apply at multiple sites. It incorporates a system of matching by family preference and referral that eliminates both families accepting seats at multiple locations and families sitting on multiple waiting lists while there are seats available, thus maximizing the use of available seats in the network. All of this ultimately results in the greatest number of children being served. Every program that takes public dollars to serve at-risk children is required to participate as a condition of licensure or funding. In order to ensure that these programs are in compliance, they must sign assurances annually to obtain academic approval, which is the mechanism through which we are able to require all program types to participate in their community networks, coordinated enrollment, and the accountability system. And now Dominic is going to go into a little more depth and detail and provide more information on the components of coordinated enrollment and what successful coordinated enrollment should include.
Thank you, Lindsay. So in 2014, the Louisiana State Legislature defined coordinated enrollment in four major ways with Act 717 and required all communities fully implement each component. And it's important to note here that coordinated enrollment is about parent choice, which means that families must be empowered to choose what is best for their children. And that's why the state legislature enabled the formation of locally managed enrollment systems that help to coordinate information so that families know about all available seats in the area, coordinate eligibility so that families easily know what programs they qualify for, and coordinate applications so that families can apply to all programs through one application. And finally, preference-based matching so that families can enroll their children in their highest-ranked preferences available. Here, it's important to understand that this is locally driven, but the state still requires that each of the four elements be included in all approaches to coordinated enrollment. Here, Bulletin 140. It's important to know that Bulletin 140 is a guidepost for lead agencies, community networks, and sites. The requirements outlined here are shared expectations. So lead agencies are expected to push their community network and program providers to help them meet these expectations. At every point, they are expected to work in close collaboration. And so in order for the department to fully evaluate funding requests, we look to enrollment numbers to help us understand needs across all networks. And to help us do this, lead agencies are required to count all at-risk publicly funded children as of October 1st and February 1st, and to submit a coordinated funding request and to submit a coordinated enrollment plan. To do this, we stress that communities work together throughout the year to achieve coordinated enrollment, which is a unified process that makes things easier for families. So beginning with the October 1st child count, and then in the February 1 child count, we look at the number of children and the funds needed to serve them. Communities then create plans to address and increase access based on the child count, at-risk data, and family demand. Finally, you'll implement the plan, filling those publicly funded seats. Here, it's important to note that the model does not change. Whether it's Head Start, school, or child care, the model remains the same, which makes lead agencies a type of united front for coordinated enrollment. So this is what we constantly push for. And the question we ask is, does your plan include each of these full model areas? And are you doing it as a group?
I have a question, Dominic.
Yeah, sure.
One of them is, can a family wait list for a higher quality program if they, in an interim way, have to accept a lower quality program? Can they still be on a wait list for a higher quality program?
Yeah, good question. And this is, again, all about family choice.
Maybe it's
communities
local, too.
Decide.
Yeah.
Yeah, so local communities can decide how their waitlist system works.
I see.
But
okay.
the families
and,
have a right to choose.
Okay, because they might find they want, take a lower quality program while they wait for an open seat in a higher quality program. And I was just curious about if they took a seat, was that it, and they were now off the wait list? You know what I mean? Or could they still be waiting for something higher quality? And my other question was, when you talked about the funding allocations, is Head Start, do you have, Head Start state grantees? Does the Head Start money flow through the state? Or, how do they account for, is it more like just them announcing this is how much Head Start financing and how many slots we have in our catchment area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to step in and just answer this one. So basically, how it works with Head Start is you're absolutely right. Head Start grantees are local. And as part of the work with community networks, the lead agencies work very closely with their Head Start grantees. In some cases, our Head Start grantees cross over community networks, right? It may be the same Head Start grantee for multiple community networks. So that Head Start grantee may be working with multiple community networks, in multiple community networks with multiple lead agencies. What we require them to do is to tell us how many publicly funded children they're serving through that child count function, so we know how many seats are being filled within each community network. But we do not allocate funding for Head Start at the state level. That's determined, at the federal level with each grantee.
Okay, but it's more like you can see how many seats are in that community for Head Start. Exactly, we can see how many seats there are.
Okay. And through that process, really, of working together to count seats and aggregate demand, our communities can actually work together to determine what the best way to use Head Start resources are. So in some communities, we've had Head Starts, say, there are enough 4-year-old seats right now at the school level. What if we start serving more 3-year-olds? So, we've really, with the close partnerships that are sort of enabled and fostered through the community network structure, we're able to not only connect the Head Start partners with the schools and with the child care, but also enable or ensure that funding within each community is being maximized to serve as many kids. So that enables kids to attend programs where maybe in the past they wouldn't have, or without the coordination, they wouldn't have been able to get a seat.
Well, that's just great clarification. Thank you both.
Yep.
Yeah, no problem. And I think that's actually a great segue into what we prepared for you guys, which is a mini case study. And this comes from one of our community networks in Calcasieu Parish schools. And the idea here is that in order to increase access to early childhood programs, Community networks must also understand where the access is limited and then think strategically on how to maximize those resources. And so the mini case study that we have here is about maximizing seats, particularly for 3s and 4-year-olds. And the problem was that not all 3s were being served and not all seats for 4s were being used. The solution was that involved maximizing seats for 4s by removing all 4s served by Title I to LA 4 seats. And the result was that more 3s were served and Title I seats that were being used by 4s. Here,
I just want to say one more thing about that example. That's such a perfect example because often when states are deploying a large pre-K program, without this close coordination locally, it can disrupt the flow of Head Start funding into the state because the pre-K chews up, the population. And but this local coordination that you've instituted here really helps them be aware of all the funding available and actually maximizing all the funding available within their areas. I think that's really interesting.
Yep. And right now, community networks are working together to prepare for enrollment fairs, roundups, expos, and other events to showcase their community's child care, Head Start, and pre-K options to help families make the best choice for their child. So here you can see 2 examples. One is an early childhood extravaganza flyer where communities are reaching out to families in their local communities to come on out and learn about a variety of their program providers. And the other is taken from a website just showing their event dates where they list out all of the dates for their open enrollment period and how families can apply, looking at eligibility requirements and submit applications online. Yeah, and another important piece of this is that all providers must be included in this. So when we talk about coordinated enrollment planning, one of the requirements is that lead agencies will convene all of their program providers to agree on one unified or coordinated plan so that they go out speaking with one voice to achieve the goal of maximizing choice for families. Community networks also use a unified eligibility determination form shown to the right to ensure the parents are able to turn to anyone in the network to get the important information they need. Also to ensure that every provider knows the options available to all at-risk children in their network, and to ensure that a basic referral system is in place among program partners. And this, of course, helps us to reduce wait lists. Here again, we only provide the basis for this, but community networks are free to make adjustments to best suit their local environment and needs. Additionally, a unified application is used by all providers. Of course, this allows for clear communication and publicity around important dates and deadlines, such as eligibility, application, and enrollment deadlines, and a central point of entry where all providers enroll children on the same timeline, allowing for ongoing enrollment options, and also ensures that only the most important information is collected to help them apply and be matched to seats. Once again, we only provide a basis for this, but it looks different in every community. What matters most, though, is that parents can rank their choices and submit applications. And we see this, like I said, we see this happening in different communities in different ways. Some communities have an online system where they're able to do all of this, and others do it by paper. But the goal here is that there's access available for families and they know what their options are. And so this brings us to matching based on preference. Of course, the heart of this is that community networks work to ensure that every family who submits an application through the coordinated enrollment system will be considered equitably. This typically happens in one of 2 ways. 1, online systems that match families based on stated preferences and eligibility information, or 2, where community meetings match paper applications with family rankings to open and available seats. A coordinated enrollment system focused on equity helps families by increasing access to quality early learning, by leveling the playing field, and preventing reliance on first-come, first-served method, creating an ongoing process with a main enrollment time frame. And last but not least, we work with our lead agencies to improve their family-friendly web presence to help them better use their platforms to engage and empower families. We also ask them to link their sites to a new and exciting school and center finder that that help them identify and learn about a broad range of programs for their children. And my colleague, Masha, will talk to you a lot more about School and Center Finder.
Great, thanks. So yes, as Dominic said, this fall, Louisiana launched the first of its kind family-oriented website with information about all programs serving children birth through 12th grade. This information is available publicly and it's easily accessible, which can help families make informed choices about their care and education for their children. As Dominic touched on, with our communities working very closely with their local partners to inform families through extravaganzas where all the child care, Head Start, and public school partners are available, through advertising, where they're putting signs on bulletin boards at churches or schools, or they're, promoting it through the energy bills that families are receiving, or if they, even yesterday we learned that one community network works with their council on aging to get to the mamas and papas who are keeping the kids, during the day so that, they can say, hey, there are these quality options available to you. As communities are doing this critical work on reaching families and telling them about their options, Louisiana at the state level has also worked to try to make this information more easily accessible through our new tool, the School and Center Finder, which is what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. I hope you take the chance to look at our website. It's www.louisianaschools.com. And it was really designed for families to use, to help them navigate their choices and make informed decisions about their care and education for their child. So it's really family-friendly. It's designed for families to use to either search for sites either by name or by location, so they can go right to a center that they've heard about, or maybe they saw a web advertisement for, or maybe, as we know, a lot of families find care through word of mouth. So they may have, heard about a center, want to look it up some more, they can jump right to that center. Or if they're new to an area, or just, having their first child, they don't know what options are available to them, they can type in an address, they can type in a landmark or location, they can type in a parish or district, they can type in a zip code. So they really have a lot of different options to explore their geographic area and learn more about the options that are available to them. Again, this is a system that is for birth through 12th grade. So the same place that families are going to learn more about their options for elementary, middle, and high school is the same place they're going to learn about the child care, Head Start, pre-K, and even family homes in their area. So they can sort of limit the searching scope by grade level or age as well. So the map browsing view that you see here, and I'm going to run through a few screenshots of the system, but of course I strongly recommend that you take a look at the website itself, as it's very easy to use and you'll see it for yourself. But as you can see on the screenshot, the map browsing view, which is similar to Yelp or Google Maps, is a family-friendly way to see the options that are available to them geographically. There are filters at the top of the page that they can use to sort of search or change the way they see the results. They can filter by zip code, by program type, whether or not the program takes public funds to serve their kid. They can also use the filters to look at quality options, to say, I only want to look at programs that scored in the highest range, or I want to look at programs that scored above a certain range. And that can help them to narrow down their options and see really what they want to see and what's available to them. In addition to a search feature that allows them to sort of winnow down the choices, we also the website also lets families track their favorites and compare up to 3 options. So they can use the little arrows that are sort of reverse or facing each other to compare up to 3 choices side by side, which is a really unique feature of the system, but I think helps families see what's most important to them instead of having to take notes or having to compare paper pamphlets, they have it all on one screen. Or if they are starting to collect a list of favorites, like a shopping list, instead of having to research them all individually, they can click the heart next to each site, and that creates a running list for them where they can go back and, click the link and look more at each one of those schools. Additionally, each of the websites for each program, so as you can see here, there's an About Our School, and each one of these are uniquely linked. So an early childhood community network may link to all of these different programs on their own community network website, which Dominic showed you. They could also incorporate it into their unified application if they have an online application, so that families, while they're applying, can click on that link and learn more about that program. So we really have tried to make this accessible to them in multiple ways, and we think that with the addition of the School and Center Finder, families will be able to learn even more about the programs in their community through the coordinated enrollment process. So this page provides site-level overview information, a lot of which is very critical to families as they're making decisions about the care and education of their children. This includes information like hours of operation, the director's name, information about licensing and inspection visits, whether or not the site provides transportation or before and after care. And then the email information and the phone number for the center or school is right there on the page so that families can use that information directly from this online portal. In addition to these search features, our rating system also gives insight on what kids are experiencing. At the same time, we know that families are not policy wonks. They can't sort through an accountability system. So this website provides accessible, comparable information for all programs in the same place that families are accessing information about, their information about the schools that their K-12 kids are sitting in. We provide an overall rating for each center or school that's comparable, right? Whether or not you're looking at a Head Start, a public pre-K, a non-public pre-K, or a child care center, that rating is the same. It's comparable across those different programs. Since it's one overall metric, it's easily digestible and easily compared. And to explain this metric, the overall rating, which is based on class scores, we've created a video, which you can see linked here, the arrow points to it, that walks families through the important components of quality and what we're essentially looking at with our quality rating system. So that video being linked right on the page where they're looking at the quality information can help families get to information about what is even important to look at when you're comparing these sites and comparing these schools so that they have that information right in front of them. In addition to an overall rating based on class, we also go into the individual metrics that class is evaluating and the individual domains. But again, like I said, we know that families may not necessarily be experts on this tool, so within the system and on this very page, there's a link that provides more information about each metric in family-friendly language that they can use to interpret these results and know sort of what they're looking at when they look at each program. Beyond the information that we collect from class and provide a rating based on, we also provide best practices information. Things like, does this site use assessment regularly? What is the quality ratios for children per teacher? Are they using a high-quality curriculum in their pre-K and infant toddler classrooms? What are the degrees and certifications that these teachers have? So this is just information that's being provided that families can use to inform their choices. And each one of these metrics also includes a little link with a description that can pop up right there for families on what's being measured and why it's important. Finally, as Kay talked about, we're approaching this from the community network perspective, meaning all of the programs within a community are working together, both to improve access through coordinated enrollment and to improve the quality of their programs and their offerings for families. So as such, we also provide, similar to a district report card, we provide a community network performance profile. That's linked on every site's performance profile that is being accessed in Louisiana School and Center Finder. So they can click it and they can see information about their community as a whole. How did their community do? How did it compare to the state? What is the investment in quality here in terms of curriculum, in terms of whether or not teachers are satisfied with the supports that are available to them, and then how families responded in terms of the ease of enrollment and also the quality that's available. When we released the School and Center Finder, we knew that we needed to work very closely with our communities and with our partners to make sure that this actually got into the hands of the families that need it the most. As Lindsay mentioned, many of our programs are limited to serving at-risk families, based on their income. And so we knew that to reach the most at-risk families, we needed to work closely with the people who work with them. That included, not just our school and centers that we work with through our community network approach, but also community organizations like pediatric associations, realtor associations, United Way, other organizations that work closely with young families. We reached out to chambers of commerce and other nonprofits to also make sure that they had this information and they could give this information to families who are, starting this search for care and education for their children. And we hope that this website really provides an alternative to some of those other websites where you might Google a child care center and you see, greatschools.com or some other website that's just collecting a little bit of information. This is really a much more comprehensive view of each one of our sites and our centers. And we've worked very closely with our community networks, in particular with our lead agencies, so that those coordinated enrollment plans that Dominic spoke about include how they're going to get the new School and Center Finder into the hands of families and ensure that those pages that we just walked through, the profiles, both for sites and for community networks, are getting into the hands of families who are looking for that information. They're really hungry for it to try to make informed choices about the care and education for their children. So we've reached the end of our, overall presentation on the work that we've done in Louisiana to not only unify the system, but also to make sure that our programs work together to inform families of their choices, and then the work that the state has done to really try to get quality information into the hands of every family. On this slide, we've really listed our contact information for each one of us. If there's any questions that you have about any part of the work that we went over, we strongly suggest that you reach out to us. You may have questions later on, so please feel free to email us. We've also listed a few of our resources. So again, please check out Louisiana School and Center Finder. The URL is listed here. But we also have included, if you're interested in the collaborative work that Kay spoke about to get, communities together and have a lead agency that works on behalf of the community network to really convene all the partners, our guidebook is included here. We also have our coordinated funding request guide, which includes all the information about the different programs that we offer. As Lindsay mentioned, we have a number of them, and we really work to try to make this as coordinated as possible, even when there's different funding sources, funding pre-K and early childhood. And then we also have resources related to our performance profiles. If you're interested in how we get to that quality rating that's included in the School and Center Finder, this page has a lot of information about how we do that. So, Debbie, do you want to sort of facilitate the questions?
Yes, we have a question in the chat box, and I'd like to encourage the other participants on the webinar to submit questions if you have any for North Carolina or Louisiana. Our first question is, if a center achieves a new STAR level or increases, let's say, their teacher qualification or shows some other improvements, how often is their data updated on the website?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually, with our performance profiles, we essentially synced up to the timeline for K-12 report cards. So when we released our early childhood performance profiles, we did that for this year at the exact same time that K-12 debuted their report cards. So we're now on the same schedule. So that means we update this information once a year in the same way that K-12 would release report cards, we release performance profiles. And it's actually through the same system now. It's, in the School and Center Finder in the exact same place.
I have a question about in the chat box about the website. Was this website basically already in play for the K-12 system and you added on or built in, or was the whole of the website created together for the early childhood through 12th grade system?
So that's a great question. So we took a unified approach to building the entire website, and I think it does actually satisfy one of the consumer education requirements for the CCDS grant. So we knew we were, A, doing very important things for families, but B, also meeting a requirement that we provide high-quality information to families about child care programs. And so to that note, even our our tuition-based child care centers are included in this system, even if they don't take public funds and are not evaluated. Families can still find them in the system and can still access licensing information from them there. But this whole project started with a birth to 12 vision in mind.
That's really interesting. Tell me a little bit about how are children with disabilities or special needs or that need early intervention services, is there information for those families as well that are looking for specialized supports?
Yeah, so not at the state level, but at the local level, we require that they incorporate into their coordinated enrollment campaigns their child find or child search and their folks that are required to really work with special populations. So that includes their homeless coordinators, for example. That includes their special education services. We also have focused on asking them to include somebody for their ELL population. So they often will include somebody from their department or maybe somebody from like the high school who coordinates that in their early childhood information campaign events. So really at the local level, we've been really trying to connect families to those resources through those locally coordinated information campaigns.
That's great. To what extent do lead agencies collaborate with one another to learn from each other about how to implement these initiatives in their communities? What are you seeing within the communities and then between the communities?
So thanks for that question. This is Kay, and I'll start with within the communities. I think folks learned early on that relationships were key. Before they could do anything well, they needed to play well in the same sandbox. So for some folks, that was really easy. For others, it has taken a bit more time to get to the point where they're really working well together, but it helped to have the common language to focus on. And as I pointed out earlier in my presentation, we are always offering opportunities for communities to connect with each other. When we started, we would hold forums on a quarterly basis, and then once all of the pilots became actual community networks, we have quarterly collaboration events that are aligned with K-12 collaboration. So everyone is together across the state. For instance, we're doing those this week. We had yesterday our meeting for the Baton Rouge area. We will travel to the New Orleans area tomorrow, and then next week we'll do the same thing, same road show in Lafayette, which is in the southwestern part of the state, and then we'll head north. Folks can attend these wherever they want to, so sometimes you might have someone who changes location just to get a different perspective. But one thing that has really worked well with this project is we think we have built a good sense of community, both locally and across the state.
I would also add that we hold weekly office hours, which I think has been helpful for our lead agencies, so that they can connect with our team and with each other. So that's always available to them as a resource. We do it every single week. That's not in person, it's remote, but they still have that opportunity. And then once a year, we have something called the Teacher Leader Summit in June, and that is a birth through 12th grade summit where communities can come together in New Orleans. We host a bunch of sessions. We additionally feature our community networks who want to present. And so that's an opportunity where they get to come together as an entire state to learn from each other, to learn from best practices that we've sort of picked up. And our child care directors and teachers have also started coming to those as well. So we've been able to see, a really increased presence from early childhood over the past couple of years.
And one more thing to add to that, Masha, this is Kay. I think what folks have realized is they, like us, have seen a synergy build as this has gone along, and they now know there is strength in numbers. So they have a united voice locally, a united voice statewide, and they know they have impact with that voice. So it's really been an interesting study.
That's great. Thank you so much. Do you have a process to evaluate the parent's child care search experience, like any kind of a satisfaction survey or an evaluation on how the search went for families or focus groups, or how do you figure out if it's working for families?
Yeah, I think that's a question we're constantly trying to ask ourselves. So there's a few ways that we get at family satisfaction. One, we actually do a statewide family satisfaction survey that asks questions both about how satisfied families were with the enrollment process, meaning exactly what you just said, finding a center, learning about their options, and actually enrolling in that center, and then also about the quality of the program that they were able to access. So we collect that information from as many families as will submit the surveys. But I think also the approach that we have taken here, with empowering local lead agencies to then convene their providers within their community, allows us to get a better understanding, even anecdotally, of what's happening and what's working and what needs to be improved. Because these lead agencies, they serve as their representative for their community to us, meaning, we funnel a lot of information through the lead agencies to providers, but they also funnel information back to us. They let us know when things aren't working, when families are frustrated. They also let us know when they've encountered a breakthrough so that we can sort of help to scale that across communities. And these, lead agencies are working directly with the families. They are hosting these events. They are doing the eligibility determination. So that really does mean that they're very informed about what's happening for families in their community.
I have a couple of questions about the rating specifics, so let's move into that right now. The first question is the rating of the program, and it's proficient. Can you go through what the programs are rated as? And that's based on the class score, right?
Yeah, I can
go
into that because I'm very concerned that it could take a lot of time to walk through our accountability system. But Louisiana has created since 2012 a unified accountability system for public schools, non-public schools, Head Start, child care. They all participate in the same accountability system. And essentially what this is, as Kay mentioned before, every program is required to do 2 class observations in every classroom in a publicly funded site. That's important to note. So every child care center, even if they take one child funded through CCAP, the entire center is evaluated using the class tool. And those scores are rolled up, and we use that to say, whether or not they're excellent, which is the highest rating, proficient, which is the second highest rating, approaching proficient, which is the second lowest rating, and then unsatisfactory, which is the lowest rating. And then our whole policy dives into sort of, what happens when you're excellent, what happens when you're unsatisfactory, to continue to incent improvement and essentially ensure that public dollars are being used so that children are getting the best experience as possible. We did align our rating system to those ratings that I just walked through, which is both the number, the score, and then the rating. So we do still have those stars, but those stars are specifically for the school readiness tax credits. How we communicate quality now is not through the stars, but is actually through the ratings that I just described.
That's great. But the feature that you added that was just so unique and innovative is that you let the programs also say something about how they're using some key indicators that you found to relate to school, preparedness for school and child outcomes, such as something about the curriculum, the assessment, and a few other the qualifications of the teachers. Are those self-reported by the programs, or is there a way to assess that or understand that?
Yeah, great question. So for the most part, those are self-reported, but we're continuing to look into ways to audit, to collect that information in different ways. So you're right. We do collect the assessment information directly from Gold. So that one's not self-reported because we find out exactly, how often they assess their children. But then the other metrics like curriculum implementation, teacher degrees, and teacher certification, they self-report that information to us, and then we do a few checks on the data, but overall it's mostly self-reported that gets reported on the performance profile.
That's very helpful. Now to the weedy question we got in the chat box. Does each lead agency have a class reliable rater who do the 2 ratings per classrooms each year, or are the raters housed centrally or some other approach? I thought that what we just talked about set up that question so that people would see the context.
So this is Kay. Thanks for that question. That was a really big lift for our lead agency. So when we began this with Cohort 1, we told them we wanted them to implement Gold, we wanted them to implement CLASS, and all of their programs needed to use the same learning standards. The thing that we got the biggest pushback on was CLASS, because at that time we had perhaps 1 or 2 reliable observers in the state, and it was, how do we do this? So they did. They began training. They began sharing training. They began practicing implementing the observations. So now, at this point, I would say probably all but one of our community networks has their own organically grown class reliable observers. The one that does not is using contracted observers, but is working this year to have their own embedded local observers that are from their local programs. So that's been part of the learning process, and we have seen that it has gone hand in hand with improvement and awareness of what needs to be done at the program level. So when we have principals who become reliable observers, child care directors who become reliable observers, it really assists them with helping coach their teachers to get the improvement that needs to come about.
And with a standardized approach, it enables you to focus on professional learning and technical assistance around 2 very specific tools, the Gold and the CLASS. So it can line up across the state with standardized supports, although I'm guessing those vary by community as well, right?
It does, but that's a good point because it lets people have a common language to talk around. Mm-hmm. So we can get up in front like we did yesterday with several communities in the room and look at data and use the same language to talk about data and all be on the same page with understanding the concepts. They even are to the point with sharing how they analyze the data. So it's and help inform us as well. So it's really interesting when everyone is using the same tools and can have the same focus.
Well, thank you all very much. And seeing no more questions or points in the chat box, I'd like to turn to wrapping up for the day. And going way back to the beginning of our conversation in North Carolina, Danielle, can you do you have any final thoughts to share for us about the work that you've been discussing today?
Well, I just want to commend Louisiana on just an amazing job that they're doing. I was taking copious notes of some things that we can lovingly lift and use here in Durham. So thank you for that really intense sharing. Just, again, as I mentioned, to just be pliable because, again, we want to be sure that we are truly meeting the needs of families and not assuming their needs and really receiving guidance from the families on what's a best approach for them and how can we best support them as they identify quality care for their children.
Thank you, Danielle. Louisiana team, just say who you are and chime in as you will.
Yeah, this is Masha. I would just echo exactly what Danielle just said. I think the Louisiana model is entirely based on listening to the field and letting the field drive our work. And I think that when we started the work of coordinated enrollment, we knew what was possible, but they've really shown us the way. They were the ones who came up with the multiple different ideas of how to reach families in their communities. They've, really been so creative in hosting reading by the railroad events and other different ways to, connect with their families and get that information into their hands. And I think we have sort of found the best approaches to say, how can we best serve these local community networks? How can we best ensure that they are prepared to do this work, and really try to listen to them and to make sure that we are being as responsive as we can within our model and within our approach. Anything you want to add?
That's a good summary, Masha, I think.
Anyone else from Louisiana? Well, I'd like to thank you all for coming into our learning community and sharing your innovation and valuable thinking. It really, to what you said, Danielle, it really helps when we share ideas. I find on every single one of these calls I learn something new, and I'm writing like mad as well. So I appreciate everybody being on the call today. And again, thank you to our presenters. Goodbye till next month.